Things are heating up between Egypt and Israel, and this is not looking good at all.
احنا في أزمة دبلوماسية الاتصالات.
We are in a diplomatic crisis. Communications between President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and the Israeli Prime Minister has been severed.
Division between Egypt and Israel is growing.
Egypt has reportedly temporarily walked out of its historic mediation role between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Now, a few weeks ago, on this channel, I posted a video which was titled, "This is how you'll know that Hamas is finished."
So Egypt is currently being controlled by a secular guy by the name of Sisi. Sisi is a former general. There's nothing he fears more than the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, you have to understand, Hamas has a really bloody history with this guy. They have deep ties with ISIS, which is entrenched in the Sinai Peninsula. And they've carried out a lot of terrorist attacks in Egypt with ISIS, with coordination with Hamas. They've assassinated the Attorney General of Egypt in 2015, etc., etc. So there's a lot of bad blood between Egypt and Hamas. All that stopped about 6 years ago. So 6 years ago, the current leader of Hamas, a guy by the name of Yahya Sinwar, comes out and says, yo, Sisi, look, we disagree on everything. You're secular. We're the Muslim Brotherhood. You're Egypt, we're Hamas. We don't care about Egypt. Leave us alone. Don't meddle in our business. And I promise you, we will not work with ISIS on the Sinai Peninsula to do anything that's detrimental to Egyptian security interest. So Egypt is going to sit there, specifically Sisi is going to sit there, and he wants to make sure that Hamas is actually dead, that they cannot hurt anymore. Hamas is finished, 100% dead like a cockroach, and only then, only once he knows, and once Egypt accepts that Hamas is dead and it cannot come back to revenge and to meddle and to do all this crap in Egypt, then we'll know that Hamas is finished.
I've explained to you that Egypt is an extremely fragile country. Despite its military might, despite its massive size, it has a lot of problems with the Muslim Brotherhood, with the Islamists, that are threatening the existence of this secular country. Now, there's been a lot of water under that bridge, a lot of discussions, but the main gist of this, as I explained in that video, is the moment Egypt starts playing ball with the Israelis, with the United States, with the whole Gaza day after the war initiative, this is how you can know, you can tell, this is your barometer. This is how you know that Hamas is finished. It's no longer relevant. Now, if Egypt isn't playing ball with the Israelis or the United States, that means that Hamas is alive and kicking, because Hamas poses a serious threat to Egypt through the relationship between them and their Muslim brothers in Egypt. They can wreak a lot of havoc in that country. They can destabilize the whole government, believe it or not. And that is why, a few years ago, the leader of Egypt, Sisi, he struck a deal with the leadership of Hamas, basically saying, look, I'm not going to meddle with what you're doing. I'm not going to play ball with the Israelis. I'm going to be absolutely neutral. I'm going to stand by. I'm not going to interfere. Do your thing, but don't do anything in Egypt. Don't do anything that threatens me, my country, and my stability. I'll leave you alone. You leave me alone. And that deal lasted for years. It is still, in fact, active. The fear of Hamas for Sisi, for Egypt, is greater than the fear of not being supported by the U.S. or with the relationship with Israel, which is currently quite shaky. And the reason is that right now, we're moving on to the point where this is being tested. Will Egypt play ball with the United States and with the Israelis or not? So far, Egypt has been very low-key in this war. If you noticed, it has not participated in the naval coalition that is supposed to open up its own Suez Canal. It stayed out of this. It also did nothing to help the Israelis. It did nothing to help the people of Gaza. They didn't open the border, they didn't accept any refugees from Gaza, because that would have gone against the interest of Hamas. Hamas wanted them to stay there because they needed them to be human shields. They needed the humanitarian crisis in order to put pressure on Israel. So Hamas had a vested interest in nobody being able to leave Gaza. And the Egyptians kept the gate closed. If you don't know this, the Egyptians share quite a significant border with Gaza, and they've kept it closed all along the war, not accepting any refugees. Now, the idea here was that the fear of Hamas causes Egypt to kind of stay on the sideline, not participate in this, not in the naval coalition, not in accepting any refugees, and mainly in sending lots of aid and criticizing Israel for not allowing more aid to come in, and saying no to any future plans in which the Egyptians are supposed to police Gaza in the day after in some sort of a joint Arab task force. You see, the Israelis conquered North Gaza. Now they're operating in South Gaza, and they're closing in on the headquarters of Hamas in a city called Han Yunis. Now, once they actually clean out Han Yunis, the next destination will have to be something that's called the Philadelphi Corridor or the Philadelphia Route.
Philadelphia.
It must be shut. It is clear that any other arrangement would not ensure the demilitarization that we seek.
Now, that's a 9-mile borderline between Gaza and Egypt. And that 9,000-mile borderline is the source of all problems for the Israelis. Because despite the blockade the Israelis initiated to prevent the Gaza Hamas power to get militarized, it didn't work because there was a leak in the blockade. And that leak was the border with Egypt. The Egyptian border served Hamas over 17 years in which it armed itself through the teeth with the Egyptians looking to the other side, literally looking away. Now, what happened is that in 2005, the Israelis decided to clear out of Gaza, basically saying, look, we're going to give you your own country status. For that, we're going to clear every single Israeli who's settling in Gaza, every single soldier. We're not going to be there. Do your thing. And as they cleared out Gaza, immediately, within a year, that Philadelphia route, that Philadelphi Corridor, the border with Egypt and Gaza got took over by Hamas, as the rest of Gaza. And right away what happened is that border started being utilized by Hamas to smuggle massive amounts of military equipment into Gaza, with the Egyptians looking to the other side. It was done by paying off local Egyptian guards, by digging tunnels underground, by a vast network of smugglers who've made billions of dollars off this for the past 17, 18 years. But the fact of the matter is that under the open watch of the Egyptians, this border became a revolving door of military equipment flowing into Gaza. Now, the result, as we now know it, was total militarization of Gaza and the October 7th attacks on Israel. Now, the Israelis have to close that loophole, because the stated purpose of this war for the Israelis mainly is to take away the guns from Hamas. They may not be able to destroy the concept, the idea of Hamas. God knows if they can or not, but they can definitely take away their guns. The problem is you cannot take away their guns knowing full well that within a couple of years, all the same guns will be back in Gaza through that Philadelphia Corridor, through the Egyptian border. So the Israelis have to deploy on the Gaza side of the border with Egypt and close that loophole. The only problem is that the Egyptians are not particularly fond of this idea, let's put it this way, and we're being very gentle here. In fact, every single Egyptian official that has voiced their opinion about this was extremely pissed and very vocal about this. So what's going on here? I'm going to tell you right away, it's not exactly what it seems. Now, obviously, the Egyptians are not really excited about having the Israeli military literally on their border because it kind of goes against the concept of their peace agreement. And also, it's kind of a loss of faith on the Egyptian side, allowing the Israelis to do that in their face. But the main reason here is the retaliation of Hamas that will come if the Egyptians allow this to happen. Now, obviously, Hamas is hoping to survive this war somehow and to start rearming themselves on the day after. And they need that loophole, that Philadelphia Corridor, to remain open. If it doesn't, if the Israelis remain on the Philadelphia route, on the Philadelphia Corridor, closing it off, the task of rearming Hamas is going to become a very unrewarding exercise for these guys. So they're looking at Egypt saying, what you guys going to do? Because if you guys are going to play ball with the Israelis, if you're going to allow them to take that, we're going to take our anger on you. And we're going to work with our Muslim brothers in Egypt to cause a lot of havoc for you, which you don't want. So what can we learn from this that you won't get in mainstream media? And this is becoming very interesting from this point on. Check this out. You see, the Egyptians don't really care about the Israelis getting control of the Philadelphia Corridor because up until 2005, that's literally was the reality. The problem is that this means that Hamas is still very much relevant. In fact, it's relevant enough to stoke fear in Egypt not to play ball with this. Now, look, the Egyptians are very vocal about not being for it. But If they play the game well enough, and if they show that the Israelis done it despite the Egyptian objections, they're hoping to kind of get both worlds. They would like to cut off Hamas from Egypt as well, but they're hoping for the Israelis to do it, so they don't have to get involved in this. Now look, the Sinai Peninsula, the border between Gaza and Egypt, is an extremely wild and dangerous territory. It's vast and it's not really sovereign to Egypt as much as you would think. The forces there are way too small to police this. The Egyptians, they don't have the manpower, the desire, or the budget to do so. They would love for the Israelis to take over that job. But the problem is that, number one, Hamas may retaliate. And the second problem is that, don't forget that even though Egypt isn't really a democracy, the support of the street in Assisi is critical for the survival of his regime. And if he's seen as somebody who just gave up to the Israelis what they want without a fight, it's going to have a lot of trouble on the Egyptian street. So the Egyptians are playing a game here in which they're saying, no, we won't have it. Over a dead body, they're trying to create a situation that they don't have too much of a PR damage at home and a PR damage versus the Hamas, playing both ends, trying to keep it safe, knowing full well that the Israelis will take the Philadelphia route. So any talks of a war between Egypt and Israel, at least right now, based on what's going on in the Philadelphi Corridor, is not happening. And even though I just told you that Hamas is still relevant, here's the kicker. The end may be quite near. Because you see, over the past month, there's been quite a few developments that show us that Hamas is losing its power, its influence, its clout, its cachet. Over the past month, we had two PLO, Palestinian Authority officials, come out and criticize Hamas. The most recent one 2 days ago, saying that Hamas is a terrorist organization. For a Palestinian Authority official to call Hamas a terrorist organization, that can only be done if, number one, they're trying to get a job from the U.S. governing Gaza, knowing that Hamas is finished, and number two, not fearing Hamas retaliation, because Hamas has a lot of troops, has a lot of power in the West Bank, which is the stronghold of the Palestinian Authority, which means that in normal circumstance, no Palestinian Authority member that actually wants to stay alive would have said this against Hamas, knowing full well what would be the result. And the crazy part about this, and this is very subtle, but it's important, this statement was made during an interview this man, Ahmad al-Mujdalani, gave to the Saudi national TV, calling Hamas a terrorist organization. So we have the Saudi national TV putting out this interview against Hamas, showing us that the normalization between Israel and Saudi is still quite on track. On top of that, a few weeks ago, the United Arab Emirates, which already has an agreement with Israel, actually aired an interview on their national TV with Mohammed Dakhlan saying that the October 7th attack ruined Gaza and that Hamas didn't win anything by doing so, criticizing Hamas again, which seems to be a coordinated delegitimization attempt against Hamas by the Saudis and the UAE, along with Israel, to basically prep the Palestinian street for the day after. Now, on top of that, the Iranians are not having a good time as well. You got the Houthi rebels being bombarded by the U.S. coalition. You have massive loss of credit and cachet by the Hezbollah. Hezbollah has lost a lot of its cred when it didn't step in to help Hamas. And now, with the massive killings of the leaders of Iran Quds Force in Syria, in Lebanon, without any retaliation from Hezbollah, is ruining away. It's actually eroding the clout of Hezbollah in Lebanon as the savior, as the guys who stood up against Israel. On top of it, beyond the delegitimization of Hamas, of Hezbollah, the annihilation of the Houthi rebels in Yemen, you have massive mess inside Iran. You have the Balochistan craziness. Now, these guys want their own country, by the way. I mentioned this in the previous video. They're not really excited about being a part of Iran. So we have bombings over there. Pakistan bombing in Balochistan. Iran bombing in Pakistan. Because you see, the Balochistan region is a separatist kind of movement. And a lot of Balochis leaving Pakistan. They're kind of working together against the IRGC. So the IRGC bombs in Pakistan. The Pakistanis get mad. They bomb in Iran. You have the ISIS explosion in Iran. You have a lot of anti-regime movements getting picked up by the massive public in Iran. So Iranian people are starting to stand up against the IRGC. Massive bombings, massive craziness in Iran, which is turning out to be a huge shit sandwich for the IRGC, which I'm not sure they really wanted to eat. This seems to have developed into a massive miscalculation by the IRGC, by the Iranian regime, with Hamas, with Hezbollah, with the Houthi rebels. All of them are now on the back foot, fighting against their survival. Somehow, despite massive mistakes that was done on foreign policy by the U.S. over the past 10 years, including massive mistakes being done right now, they have managed to put the Iranian regime on the back foot. And that's quite impressive. Now, I don't know if it happens today, tomorrow, in the week, in the year, but the Iranian regime is basically on its last legs. Maybe it takes a week, maybe it takes a year, maybe it takes longer, I don't know. But this is unsustainable. And it only takes the people of Iran to actually wake up and actually kick these guys out of their country and reclaim it back, which I hope happens soon. And we'll see how this thing plays out. Now, as always, these videos are not monetized, as you know, not fully at least. So if you want to support what we do here, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TomNashReport. I would love for you to join us there, support this channel, support our work. And if you can't join, that's fine. Just share this video with your friends, with people who actually want to know what's going on. I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much for spending these few minutes with me today. I'll see you in the next one.